المؤتمر الافتراضي حول التربية والتعليم في إطار المجتمعات التي نريد. يسرني أن أعطي الكلمة الآن لرئيس السابق للبرازيل. تفضل السيد الرئيس.
Primeiramente, agradecer o convite para participar deste encontro e saudar os participantes desta mesa de diálogo. Quero cumprimentar a doutora Alice Albright, da Parceria Global pela Educação. Quero cumprimentar o Prêmio Nobel Kailash Satyarthi, promotor da Marcha Global contra o Trabalho Infantil. Quero cumprimentar o doutor Salim Mailiti, diretor-geral da Organização do Mundo Islâmico para Educação, Ciência e Cultura, e quero cumprimentar a doutora Kumbu Boliberri, relator especial da ONU para o Direito da Educação. Saúdo as organizações que dirigem e que promovem este encontro, do qual o nosso Instituto Lula tem o privilégio de participar. Quero iniciar expressando o sentimento de solidariedade à dor das famílias das vítimas da pandemia pela qual o nosso mundo está passando. Quero falar sobre esses tempos terríveis, depois de tratar do nosso tema central, que é a educação e seu papel na construção de uma nova sociedade melhor e muito mais justa do que esta em que vivemos. Neste mês de setembro, iniciamos as comemorações do centenário de nascimento do grande educador Paulo Freire. Foi meu amigo, nasceu na mesma região do Brasil que eu, no estado de Pernambuco, e foi companheiro na criação do Partido dos Trabalhadores. Será sempre lembrado pela contribuição que deu à libertação dos oprimidos no Brasil e ao redor do mundo por meio da educação. Das muitas lições que Paulo Freire nos deixou, duas são frequentemente destacadas. A primeira é a noção de que aquele que educa também está sendo educado. É um conceito que só poderia ser formulado por quem tinha a grandeza de respeitar a sabedoria dos humildes e reconhecer a existência do outro acima das barreiras sociais.
حكمة الشعوب لاختيار النظم التعليمية التي ستدعم تنمية شعوبها. الدرس الثاني الذي تعلمناه هو أن التعليم يحرر شعوبنا ومجتمعاتنا.
A brutalidade dos ricos contra os pobres, a fome e a desigualdade, o simples ato de aprender a ler e escrever era uma rara conquista para alguém no meio do povo. A educação permite ao ser humano tomar consciência de si mesmo, de que é um cidadão com capacidade.
بالتالي علينا أن نؤمن بقدرة التعليم في تحقيق الثورة التي نتوق إليها. إذا لم يتمكن التعليم من تحقيق هذه الثورة فإن مجتمعاتنا لن تتمكن من النمو، وبالتالي الحصول على التعليم لأطفال العالم أصبح بالفعل حاجة ماسة لتحسين جودة الحياة لجميع الأقاليم والقارات، والسماح لكل فرد أن يحقق أحلامه. يمكنني أن أتحدث عن تجربة البرازيل في مجال التعليم حتى نوفر التعليم للجميع. أنا شخصيا عانيت من التمييز في التعليم في بلدي، حتى على مستوى المدينة التي كنت أعيش فيها، وكنت يافعا، كنت فقيرا، وبالتالي كانت أمي هي من يعيل العائلة، ولم أتمكن من متابعة دراستي بشكل كامل، وكان علي بالتالي أن أشتغل وأتابع دراستي، ونفس الشيء كان يقوم به أيضا إخوتي. والواقع أن منذ 18 سنة خلت وثق الشعب البرازيلي بي وانتخبني رئيسا للبلاد. وبالفعل الشعار الذي كنت أرفعه هو تحقيق التغيير، وبالتالي انخرطت من اليوم الأول في العمل لتحقيق هذا التغيير. ولأول مرة منذ 500 سنة من تاريخ بلدنا، غالبية الأطفال من جميع فئات المجتمع تمكنوا من الولوج إلى ما أقوله. وبالفعل كانت تلك هي الخطوة الأولى على درب تحقيق التغيير المنشود وإيجاد الحلول للمشاكل الاجتماعية الجمة التي كنا نواجهها. 6 ملايين نسمة من البرازيليين تم انتشالهم من الفقر المدقع. 21 مليون منصب عمل تم إحداثه خلال 12 سنة التي تلت إذن التدابير التي اتخذناها. أصدقائي الأعزاء، إن السياسات التي نضعها على درب التغيير يجب أن تعتمد على التعليم. التعليم هي اللبنة الأولى في بناء صرح التنمية الذي نتوق إليها. وبالتالي إذا تمكنا من تعميم التعليم على جميع الأطفال نكون قد نجحنا في رفع هذا التحدي، ووضعنا الخطوة أو قدمنا على الخطوة الأولى على درب المضي قدما في مجال التنمية المستدامة. التعليم شرط أساسي لتحقيق التغيير، وهذا ما يجب أن تؤمن به جميع الشعوب وأيضا جميع الحكومات. لا يجب أن نركز فقط على الوفورات في الموازنات العامة، بل يجب أن نعقل الإنفاق وأن لا نحرم قطاعات حيوية كالتعليم من الاعتمادات المالية الكافية كي نحقق المقصود والمنشود. هناك أيضا مسألة إشراك الحكومات المحلية. يجب بناء قدرات
Maybe I wouldn't even have reached an adult age. I would have never learned my trade as a metal worker and going on strike with my brothers and sisters with the union. And even less, I would have managed to build, together with thousands of workers, the largest left-wing party of Brazil. The fact is that 18 years ago, the Brazilian people trusted in me and the Workers' Party, and together with our allies in government, we were trusted with the mission that could be summarized in one sole word: to make the change. I will not extend myself about the efforts that we have done to fulfill that mission, but I can summarize it in 2 sentences. For the first time in 500 years of history in Brazil, the working class majority, Black people and poor people, were put in the core center and direction of public policies. And for the very first time, the poor now join the budget, the state government budget, not as a statistical data and even less as a problem, but they were considered part of the solution of the problems for the development of my country. No result of this collective effort is even more important than the fact that 36 million Brazilians were lifted from extreme poverty. Brazil left the UN hunger map, and 21 million formal jobs were created in a little more than 12 years, including the President Dilma Rousseff's term in office. My dear friends, the set of public policies that we have adopted to change the Brazilian reality, education played a central role and an organizing role. The Bolsa Família, the family stipend program, for example, promoted income transfer to 14 million families, households, conditioning the payment of this stipend if the children attended school, amongst many other requirements. This direct relationship between income transfer and access to school is one of the key successes of the Bolsa Família, the family stipend, and that's the reason that it was adopted by so many countries. I remember that I forbidden the cabinet ministers in my government to use the word expenditure or expenses to refer to the budget in education that was tripled in numbers. Those resources were not government spending, but actually government investment in education. We invested in creating a national floor for the wages paid by the teachers in public schools. That in Brazil is managed by local governments. We invested in teachers training courses and also guaranteed school meals for the children in the schools, and that were bought by local small farmers that provide the food. And we invested in school transportation, because in a country that many regions, it's very distant, the school from home, which they would have to use buses, bicycles, and small boats to get to school. We invested in building libraries, computers for the schools, and to the students. And about my brother Fernando Haddad, who was our education minister in the great part of our period, he will speak in another day in this seminar. Unfortunately, Brazil today has not had an education minister that it will be able to participate in such a discussion as the one today, because this government today declared itself the enemy of science, culture, and education itself. I also have to mention about landmark left. The first one was the opening 430 vocational training schools that we country. This is more than everything that is ever done in the 100 years of the Republic in Brazil. These new vocational training will give we enhanced the number of enrollments in public federal universities and private universities too. We went from 4 million to 8 million students. We built 19 new universities, and the state government started to fund educational credit for the students, and we passed a bill of affirmative action to assure a quota system in of students coming from public schools, Black and indigenous people could join the university, the federal university. I am proud to say today that the sons and daughters of the working class people, the young Black people, are the majority of our university students today in Brazil, in the federal universities. My dear friends, any discussion about the future of humanity, about the society that we want to build, has to take in account the impacts of the epidemics that we face today that has come to aggravate the extreme social and economic inequality in the world. Very recently, I was invited by the Buenos Aires University to talk about the world after the pandemics. I must admit that I don't know what will happen. I still don't know what will happen, what will come of our lives. I believe no one knows, but I want to bring here some reflections. The statistics show that the majority of the victims, the pandemic victims in Brazil, are Black people, working class people, of slums and favelas, as we call it, and live in the periphery of the big cities. It's not different from the rest of the world. These are people that live in precarious homes, as we call it, and live in the big cities. It's not different from the rest of the world. These are people that live in precarious homes, that they need to get their support and work every day. They have to use public transportation, and they're much more vulnerable people because they already did not have access to sustainable food and basic health care. So the first conclusion that we can reach is that this pandemics is not democratic, because society that we live in is not democratic, at least not for the majority. Everybody is subject to be contaminated by the virus, but it's amongst the poorest that it produces devastation, a deadly devastation. This humanity emergency is not for the majority. Everybody is subject to be contaminated by the virus, but it's amongst the poorest that it produces a devastation, a deadly devastation. This humanity emergency has led the most responsible governments to adopt measures in the sense to keep the economy and people alive during the crisis, with special credit lines, income transfer programs, and even paying wages to keep the jobs. Even those rulers and the so-called experts that till yesterday defended a very rigid fiscal austerity programs, they understood that now is the moment for government spending, because life is priceless and the economy should exist due to the and not only due to the figure. And it is the state, the government, ultimately, that could moment for government spending, because life is priceless and the economy should exist due to the people and not only due to the figures. And it is the state, the government, ultimately, that could provide the resources and organize society to manage to go through this very difficult moment that we're experiencing. I believe that this is the great lesson that this pandemic is teaching us. The dogma of the minimum state, the minimum government, is only that, a dogma that you cannot find any explanation and not could be justified in the real life. The myth, the market God, a myth, because it views the lack of ability to give answers to the problems of the world. we live in. I had the privilege to talk with Pope Francis, that is dedicating to study this to his soul. We dedicating to study this to his soul. We know that this is not a task only for the economists and for people of goodwill. We have to involve the academia, the intellectuals, the artists, the political parties, the trade unions, social movements, grassroots movements, churches. Everybody has to be included. Otherwise, we will not reach anywhere if the governments of the world, the ones that have state power, do not engage themselves in a very objective way, in a deep change. We will not reach if the governments of the world, the ones that have state power, do not engage themselves in a very objective way in a deep change in the relationship between the people and money. For many centuries, they said to us that hunger and extreme poverty was as natural as rain and as the sunrise. During centuries, they told us that the poor, the majority are black, and the sons and daughters of the working class were condemned to repeat the sad story of their parents, grandparents, grandparents, and great-great-fathers. But at Brazil, during one decade, Brazil, we managed to prove that a country could be for all, and with special focus in the majority. In Brazil, we managed to prove that a country could be ruled for all, and with special focus in the majority that is excluded. The tremendous inequality between human beings is unbearable, but as it lasts, we will still always have the dream to change that moves us towards the future. This is, from my viewpoint, another lesson that we can learn from the pandemics. Even though the crisis could be deep, even though darkness could come, it relies on us to shed pandemics. Even though the crisis could be very deep, even though darkness could come, it relies on us to shed light to the darkness. And I believe that it was never so necessary to dream and to continue to struggle, to fight, to build a better world than the one that we live in. My dear friends, before I end my speech, I would like to say some few words here. We managed to prove since 2000 and 2016 that yes, it's possible to build another We managed to prove since 2003 and 2016 that yes, it is possible to build another world, because we did do that in Brazil. We proved that the poor is not part of the problem, it's part of the solution. We also proved that the poor could go to school, could attend schools. We proved that a housemaid or the son of a housemaid of a brick worker, layer worker, could become an ambassador, could become a professor, could become a diplomat. Prove that yes, it's possible to guarantee 3 meals per day. That a housemaid or the son of a housemaid of a brick worker, layer worker, could become an ambassador, could become a professor, could become a diplomat. We proved that yes, it's possible to guarantee 3 meals per day for each human being in Brazil. And we also managed to prove that we can raise the wages does not mean to increase inflation. We proved all that. We proved that we can increase the domestic market and also increase our exports. The only thing that we needed to do is to do the obvious, is to put on the people, include the people in the budget, in the national budget, to bring the people in that will be not a secondary player to become the core actor player of history, to become for each and for each state. And so to bring the people in that will be not a secondary player to become the core actor player of history, to become for each country and for each state. And so thank you very much for this invitation. Have a very good meeting, and God help us to find a solution for the pandemics and also a solution after the pandemics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. Speech should be